And welcome back to another episode of Building the Board. My name is Quinten Krzysko. I am joined by one of our fantastic scouts, Tom Kavanaugh at Tommy K underscore NFL draft on Twitter. Did I get that right, Tom?
That is me.
All right. And we are here to talk about edge rushers today. Tom, before we get into it, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Just working through these prospects. I feel pretty good where I'm at with this edge class. I feel like I've watched most of the top guys, so I can't complain.
Well, good deal. Now, before we get into the prospects for the Bears, we want to talk about the Bears' edge position currently. So, Tom, when we look at the Bears roster right now, what do we see at the edge position and how much need is there?
I would say it's like Montez Sweat and really nothing else you could consistently rely on. You like what you have in Montez Sweat. I don't think he is like a tier one type of pass rusher or edge rusher in the NFL. I think he's honestly closer to the tier two, maybe even tier three. He's more of kind of a do it all player versus being elite at necessarily anything. I still think he kind of leaves some to be desired as a pass rusher. So I think really what the Bears are need to add is maybe some top tier pass rushing ability.
Yeah, and so like when we look at it, they have Austin Booker as well, right? And that's how do you feel about Austin Booker's rookie? Like, what can you expect from him next year? Anything?
I'm not saying you can't expect nothing, like he was intriguing in the preseason. My thoughts on Austin Booker was that he's a very technical pass rusher. He has a very good feel for it. I just don't think he's maybe the NFL athlete to be a guy that's going to consistently impact the passer. I think he's going to be one of those guys that like always does well in the preseason because he's going up against preseason tackles. And then when he gets to the starters, he's maybe more of just a rotational guy. So if he's your starter, you're probably in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. My mindset with him is kind of like he was such a young, raw prospect with like not a lot of college experience. Like it's
Yeah.
a 3 year thing before you can ask, like, can this guy start? To me, it's like last year he might dabble a little. This year, if you're lucky, I think you can get him in in the rotation pretty heavy, and he starts producing. If he takes that next step there, then it's like in year 3, then you might be able to talk about him starting. But right now, I'm like, we got to hit the brakes a little. Austin Booker that if he's starting on the edge for you, you have some concerns, is the way I see it.
100%, which we'll get into like Dennis Allen's scheme and stuff like that too. Like I don't see him as a fit at all. Like I think he's really only suitable in this defense for a rotational type of role.
Now, as you say that, that's the perfect segue into our next
Right.
question.
There you
What
go.
does an edge look like in Dennis Allen's defense?
So I mean, like you can look at like his track record historically, like his time with the Raiders, Khalil Mack and the different guys he had there. I think he had Bruce Irvin there, if I'm not mistaken. But I really look at like New Orleans and what they were trying to do. I think that's like the most modern update on Dennis Allen's defense. And I think the big takeaway when you look at all the edge rushers they consistently targeted is they are big bodied, long, run defending, pocket pushing type of edge rushers. There's not these small, quote unquote, 3-4 outside linebacker, bendy types. They are the guys that crunch the pocket, that are going to hold the edge in the run game. That's kind of what he's been looking for. If you just look at like a size perspective, and I think if you watch the film, a skill set perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I just pulled it up right here as we're going. We can just throw these names out here too, since 2015 is when Dennis Allen's I believe second stint with New Orleans started. And that's so going back to 2015, look at the edge rushers he's drafted. You got Al Qadim Muhammad, you got Trey Hendrickson, you got Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey. So like those guys to me all kind of fit what you just said, right? That bigger, like he likes the freaky athletes. Like Marcus Davenport was up there, and Peyton Turner was a pretty strong athlete too with that size. But when I look at that, I also say he's not afraid of inexperience.
Definitely not. I think he's like a traits over experience and production type. I mean, not all the way. Like I thought Marcus Davenport was pretty productive for like the college level he played at. But the rest of the guys, maybe not as much.
Yeah, and some of that might have came down to like Peyton Turner. We're drafting 28th.
Right.
Like so we're just taking shots. Or Isaiah Foskey, we took him in the second round at pick 40. It's like they were just taking a shot at a guy who we might have had a first round grade on. But I think that there is like you said, a pretty clear archetype here of what Dennis Allen wants. And Tom, I always wonder about this. Like these guys because Matt Eberflus kind of liked a similar edge too, right?
Yes.
Bigger, longer guy who can really set that edge and maybe play a gap and a half in the run game. How important do you think that is to his defense to be able to not commit extra resources into the box for the run?
I think that's exactly what he wants to do. I think you said that perfectly. I think that's kind of the philosophy. Like he wants to change it up a lot on the back end, but ultimately keep numbers and coverage and then being able to stop the run with your front six, honestly. I mean, yeah, your front seven, including your nickel corner, if you're, in just traditional 4-3, but he wants to be able to stop it with those six defenders. And then obviously the nickel has to be a big part of run defense. But yeah, I think that's a huge part of his philosophy.
And Tom, you should take a second here and plug your podcast because you had a really interesting discussion a few episodes ago about the Dennis Allen defense. Can you tell everyone a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I brought on Cody Alexander, who does a lot of different X's and O's stuff. I mean, he has his own Substack that you guys can check out. It's called Match Quarters. And then he also is now a vice president, or he's the president of operations for this up and coming thing called Field Vision. I brought him on. He knows everything and more you could possibly know about the X's and O's of defenses. And we talked through Dennis Allen's scheme, kind of what kind of players he looks for, what the Bears could possibly need, what kind of players the Bears will target. Yeah, I mean, it was so insightful. So again, Q, thank you for letting me plug that. But I would just recommend for any Bears fan, if they want to learn more about his defense, to definitely check that out.
And that's the Bears Blog Boys podcast, right?
Bury the lead. Yes, it is the Bears Blog Boys podcast.
Okay. And then so our last question here before we get into prospects for you guys. How much draft capital do you expect the Bears to spend on an edge rusher in this draft?
I would think it's one of the first 3 picks that they have in the draft. I would be very surprised if it wasn't, unless they go after one of these big fish free agents, which they possibly could. I would expect them to draft at least 1 very early, if not 2 overall.
And now you say the big fish free agents, like if they go sign a Josh Sweat or a Khalil Mack, do you think that's enough?
I don't. I mean, you guys, again, if you guys want to listen to more about my takes on Josh Sweat, definitely check out my podcast. We've talked about him at length. We don't have to go into that because we have a lot of guys to cover. But yeah, I mean, Khalil Mack would be a great stopgap option. So I think you kind of want to reload the chamber still and draft a younger guy. But I honestly think to look out for a guy like Chase Young, who was literally just in New Orleans, fits the archetype perfectly. I don't think he's a great run defender that maybe Dennis Allen would ideally want. But in terms of a body type and physical thresholds, perfect fit, right? A supersized edge rusher that has experience with Dennis Allen. Look out for a guy like him. But even if they sign any of those guys, I still don't think they have the ace pass rusher that they're gonna eventually need for being a 4-and-go type of defense.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, getting that ace pass rusher guy, this little thought just keeps popping in my head of he found Trey Hendrickson in the 3rd round.
I'm saying.
I'm a little hopeful that he has some of that magic there, but I don't think it's something you can count on either. But that's just in the back of my head. It did happen.
It did happen. And maybe, the Bengals got a weird cap situation. Maybe he can go back to the real well of trying to go after, not him, but the Bears in general. You never know what other options are out there.
But with all that being said, let's get into some of these prospects here. And we got them listed on the screen for you guys who are watching. If you're listening, we'll speak them out loud to you guys. But let's start this off with Abdul Carter, the guy who's not going to be there for the Bears at 10, but we got to talk about him. Tom, what do you see in Abdul Carter?
So I think this is a good way to characterize it. So of the edge rushers from last year's class, including Jared Verse, I think Abdul Carter would still be my highest grade edge of that class. I just think he's such a special physical talent. And the crazy thing about him is he was playing linebacker before this year and he transitioned to edge. And his first couple games were pretty rough. You could tell he was getting a feel to how to get off the ball. He jumped the snap all the time and had a bunch of false starts. And honestly, throughout the season, he still kind of had that issue. But just his ascension over the year and how he was able to tie his feet to pass rushing moves with his hands and how natural that came to him. I mean, just some unbelievable stuff. If you want to talk about get off the ball, paired with bend and his ability to like duck under offensive tackles and turn a corner seamlessly. I mean, it's just unmatched, right? It's rare stuff. And honestly, like my comp for him is Von Miller. Like that's who he reminds me of. And I know that's lofty, but that kind of ability, that explosiveness paired with the flexibility, you just don't find that very often. And he has moves to rush inside. He has different answers. He can counter inside. He, is not the best power rusher, but there's elements to his game where, he flashes it at times and you think he can be a part of his game. I guess the biggest concern with him is he is lighter, right? He's listed like 6'3", 248 pounds. Definitely not a great run defender on tape. But as long as he can be like okay and not a problem, you're getting a special pass rusher, whichever team drafts him.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even fully process that he had just switched to edge this year from linebacker. And the first game that I graded for him was the West Virginia game, the first game of the season. He's still graded out like an elite score for me. And that's not just me. Like I was watching that game with my cousin who just got done playing like D3 linebacker. He just graduated and he was sitting there with me grading, like talking it through as I was grading it. So it wasn't just my eyes. It was two people's eyes who saw, yeah, that's elite tape right there on his first game ever at edge rusher. That's ridiculous. Like that guy has so much talent.
It's absurd. I mean, like, and the thing is, like, he can. It's not just flashes. Like, he consistently just whoops people, and it's awesome to see. The thing with edge rusher, I think it's not a simple position to like. This is going to sound misleading, but it's simple in the fact that the best athletes who produce the most in college are usually good NFL players, right? Mm-hmm. And I think of any of these prospects, he has the best of both worlds, right? And that's why he's clear and above the edge one of this class.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on Carter because he's not going to be there for the Bears. Mm-hmm. But like you said, Von Miller, and I feel like I see some Micah Parsons in there with the shorter arms, with the being a more speed-based guy and being able to convert speed to power so efficiently. Do you see a world where he is best used in kind of the roaming role that Micah Parsons kind of had in Dallas there his first year or two there? Or do you think he's a true edge like Von Miller was?
Maybe on early downs, like move him around and like roam around for sure. Because again, like I don't think he's a great run defender. But like on pass rushing downs, like he could obviously be effective anywhere. But I just think there's so few guys with that kind of skill set, or like he's just gonna give offensive tackles nightmares, right? And you're there. I would be very hard pressed if you have multiple guys that can do that. So I want him rushing on the edge on long and late downs. But yes, you could be definitely creative. Penn State was, right? So yeah, you could definitely be creative with him, but like ultimately I want him on the edge.
All right. So moving on to our next guy here who has been a little turbulent through this process is James Pearce Jr. Tom, where are you at with James Pearce?
He's one of the weirdest players I've ever scouted. So he comes in coming off last year, and he was declared the top pick in this year's draft. Like that's everyone thought he was going to be a top 5 pick after last year. And then this year, it wasn't bad by any means, but definitely wasn't the season that he had the year prior. It was still a good year. His production is still awesome. And I remember watching him last year. I'm like, man, like, I don't know if I see a top 5 pick. Like he's good. Like he's fine. There's something missing with him. And then I go back and watch the tape this year, and I still like him, but I don't love him. There's something missing. And what it really came down to me, Q, is for being an undersized pass rusher, which he kind of is, right? He's like 6'4", 245 pounds. People would probably point to like, okay, this guy's not going to be able to defend the run or rush with speed to power. And I really don't think those two things specifically are not big concerns for me. What really came down for me is when I watch him, he's just not very flexible. He just doesn't win around the high side on the offensive tackle's outside hip very consistently, or it doesn't look very pretty. Like he often falls down when trying to corner, or he gets pushed around the arc. Like guys can ride him out really easily. And you just wouldn't expect that from a speed, this profile of a speed undersized pass rusher. He's more of like physical in that regard. Like he wins more with speed to power, and he crosses face a lot to counter back inside. So my biggest thing with him is like, okay, can he be like center his game around a power-based style being undersized in the NFL? Like, will that even work? Because I don't think he's going to be one of the better high side rushers in the NFL. In fact, I think it's kind of a limitation for him. But he's been super productive, right? It's worked so far. That's kind of my biggest question. Like, will it work to the same degree it's worked in college? Because the production is hard to argue. The athleticism is hard to argue. He's a very weird player to me.
Yeah, he's definitely different. I've stated multiple times before, bend is something that I have a hard time processing and seeing, but I thought I saw it with him, and then I'm getting a lot of feedback that it's not there. So I go back and I rethink it, right? And I'm sitting there, yeah, I guess it's not bend that I see with him, but it's burst.
Yes.
It's he is able to burst out of angles extremely quickly, which makes me think it like process it as bend, but it's not really bent. Like, if he can get the outside shoulder on a tackle, his ability to burst laterally is really impressive. And that's where I'm like, can that work in the NFL? What will that 5 inches still be there in the NFL for him to be able to burst through that, as opposed to circling around it like a more bendy edge rusher would? And I still feel like that will be effective at the NFL level. But the thing that has really kind of come through here is the off-field stuff. And that's where I've started to knock him, where it's like, there's a lot of smoke around this. A lot of, like, some guys are dropping him down to a second. I think I've even saw someone put a 3rd round grade on him. Like, that is either there is someone really messing with his draft status with inside information of trying to like put a lot of smoke out there to make sure they can get him, or there's a lot of truth to this smoke and there hasn't been a lot of detail around it. Tom, have you heard anything about it that might be like out in the public? I feel like I haven't seen much.
Dane Brugler said that the concern with him was coaches wanted to know what made him tick. It was like a work ethic, purpose type of like, are you truly dedicated to football? That's what I had heard. I've heard nothing else about it, but the surrounding like actions that are speaking louder, like Daniel Jeremiah, like dropping him out of a 1st round mock entirely, right? Like that, to me, that signals red flags that like, okay, there's no way a guy this talented, if everything checked out, should be going out of the 1st round in this class, right? Of all classes. Like, this is not a great class, right? So a guy that's that talented, there's no way he should fall out of the 1st round. But when you see multiple major connected draft analysts having that tells me they know something that we probably don't.
Right. And that, to me, like in our grading scale for building the board, like our intangibles, other categories, only 2.5% of the grade. But when I start seeing that real off-field concern like that doesn't just impact his intangible grades to me. That impacts his floor. His floor has to come down when there are those questions, in my mind.
And 100%, Q. And what's weird with him, and I know this was a Tennessee problem, right? Like, I think the D tackle kind of suffered the same things, but like there are multiple games where he's not even starting. Like, it's so weird. Like, you really have to go and watch through the tape, because I know they rotated guys all the time. That was Tennessee's thing. I think that, like, a lot of the guys only played like 40-50% of the snaps a game because they just had such a strong rotation. However, right, James Pearce is like a 4 or 5-star recruit. Like, why is he not starting in games? Like, I always found that very odd, that one of your top recruits on your entire team is not playing. He's not starting, right? Like that always came off to me very odd.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. I'm really interested to see where he goes. I'm getting the vibe that he's not going to end up being high on the Bears board if those off-field issues are a thing, and he's already kind of a weird fit for Dennis Allen, so that's kind of where I'm sitting with it. Do you think the same?
Yeah, I don't think that he's a great stylistically, maybe from a play style, he actually fits better than you'd think, but at the same time, probably not physical threshold wise.
Yeah, I feel like they'd be out on a limb a little bit of Dennis Allen standards to take him. Like, I agree. I think that stylistically he does fit fairly well, but everything else needs to be right to make it work. And if there's another red flag on top of it, it's like I just don't think it's happening.
100%. And I don't think the red flags are stopping here with some of these other guys we're going to talk about.
Yeah, well, up next, I mean, we got Mike Green out of Marshall, who has a bit more publicly stated red flags with some sexual assault. I believe 2 different sexual assault allegations on his record, but just putting that out there. I don't know all the facts behind it, but when we talk about on the football field, I mean, this guy's a demon. I mean, playing at Marshall, so a lower level school, but Tom, what do you think of Mike Green?
All right, before I knew any of that, like this was my guy in this draft process. I turn on his tape, like not expecting much. I was like, this guy's at Marshall, right? Like, how good can he be? I saw him like, in that top 40 conversation. I was like, damn, like a guy from Marshall, like, why is he going to Marshall then? So I didn't have like high expectations. I turned the tape. He's absolutely dominant. And granted, like it's against, not great competition. So like you always kind of wonder what that was going to look like against higher competition. And, the Ohio State game was good. I don't think he had like an opportunity to really tee off and get after the passer because Marshall was getting crushed in that game. I didn't watch the Virginia Tech game, but this is a guy who knows how to rush the passer, who has a really good feel from like a technical standpoint. He's got a ton of moves, can win inside, can win outside, high side on, bending around the edge. He's super explosive, super bendy. I just think that he knows he has a lot of ways he can win as a pass rusher, and he's super competitive. Like this is a guy who's always celebrating negative plays. Like he's just the Energizer bunny, never taking plays off, giving it 110% effort all the time. Is he the best run defender because he is undersized at 6'3", 251 pounds, 32-inch arms? Like he's not that good of a run defender, and that might be a bigger issue in the NFL. That those things are all true, but he tries his ass off. Like he throws his body into blocks pretty blindly. So there's a lot to like about what he provides on the field. I really, really like his skill set. But again, in terms of a Bears fit, probably not going to be what Dennis Allen's looking for.
Yeah, I think some team is gonna get a steal talent wise with Mike Green. I think he is gonna it's just a really hard sell to take those allegations top 10.
Yes.
But he's a top 10 talent. So like that's going to balance somewhere in, I don't know, maybe the teens, 20s, but he's an outstanding football player. The allegations would scare me away. I think they might scare the Bears away based on their history. But it'll be interesting to see with the new management in place, do they take some more chances like that? Maybe in a trade down or something, but I don't think it's happening in top 10.
Unfortunately, I don't think it. I mean, they got it. The off the field stuff has to check out, right? Like with whoever drafts him. But yeah, I just don't think he's going to be very high on the Bears board.
Now, I'm actually gonna change our order just a touch here because I would like to talk about Shemar Stewart before Mykel Williams as I'm thinking this through. But Tom, Shemar Stewart, what do you got? I feel like there's a lot to talk about on this one.
Yeah. Oh man. So of all the guys besides Abdul Carter, of all the other guys we've just talked about, I think for all of the rest of the guys we're going to talk about, I think Shemar Stewart will probably be the top edge defender on the Bears board. I mean, he meets all of the Dennis Allen's, historical physical thresholds and then some. And then on top of the physical measurements of it all, he's just an unbelievable athlete. And you see that on tape. He obviously proves at the combine. I think he had a perfect RAS score. Q, correct me if I'm wrong, which we've never seen before. So, I mean, unbelievable athletic potential. You love what he does as a run defender from an ability standpoint, right? Like this is a guy that never gets pushed around. He's 6'4" or 6'5", 270 something pounds. I mean, his weight's kind of been all over the place this process. So I don't really know where he was playing at, but he never really gets pushed around. He can stack and shed guys. He can shoot gaps and make negative plays in the backfield. The instincts of like reading where the ball carrier is going and finding the ball, not always what you want it to be, but you see the talent as a run defender, and then the speed to power, pass rush flashes are very, very enticing. And he's pretty flexible for being a bigger guy. The down-to-down consistency is just all over the place. Like he doesn't really have a go-to pass rush move outside of a speed to power and an occasional trying to corner around the edge. There's really no like moves to free and beat blockers and just deconstruct blocks that really aid him. So there's a lot of development that he needs to go through to be a consistent every down impact pass rusher, and the production would tell you the same thing. But the athletic tools are off the charts, right? So if you are a believer in traits over production, he's going to be for you if you need that production element as well. You probably want to steer clear where he's being talked about currently, where he's going to get drafted.
With Stewart, it was kind of like the run defense was awesome, right? Like
Yeah.
I watched 4 games, all 4 he came away with a really strong run defense grade for me, but the pass rush grade was constantly subpar, and it was
Yes.
just like, I know you already wrote the scouting report for him over at ontapsportsnet.com. Tom, has he been playing football a lot, like since high school, before high school? Do you remember?
He has. To my understanding, he was a multi-sport athlete. I think he also played basketball, chose to focus on football. The thing with him, Q, what I really think is maybe kind of a blessing and a curse for him is he's probably been able to get away with just being a better athlete than anybody else in his entire life, right? Where he didn't really need to really hone in on the technical aspects of pass rushing, right? Because he can just run through guys. Like he said that at the Senior Bowl, he was like just telling the offensive tackles, like, I'm going to run through your face. Like that's what he was saying. And he probably for a long time could do that. I think at college we saw it wasn't as successful. And in the NFL, it damn sure won't be as successful if that's all you got. You got to offer a little bit more. Tackles will be able to take that away. Until that next step of development happens, I think you're going to see a lot of the same mixed results as he has as a pass rusher in college.
Yeah, and that's my main concern about him. Like, will he get better?
Yes.
And like I know Jimbo Fisher had, some pretty rough years of development there with Texas A&M, and maybe that's playing into it some. I'm not sure. I didn't go back and watch Stewart's tape from last year versus this year. See, maybe did the new coaching lead to some better development? Just based on PFF grades, his pass rush grade actually went down. His run defense went way up. I don't know. Stewart scares the crap out of me, if I'm being frank. Like I see the traits, I see the good run defense, and I think the run defense gives him a decent floor. But I don't know. I got burned on Tyree Wilson a few years ago, and now I'm like hypersensitive to it, I think.
I'm right there with you. I also got burned on Tyree Wilson. That was kind of when I learned how important college production is for edge rushers, like the every down consistency, like the pass rush win rate, the true pass set pass rush win rate. Sorry, these are just tongue twister words. But the pass rush grade, all that stuff is whatever you want to say about PFF. It's actually very translatable that they found year to year from college to the NFL. And he's just kind of below average in all of those metrics, and that checks out on tape. So he also scares the crap out of me. He's more like, I have like a round 2 grade on him. I know he's not going to go round 2, but that's kind of where I'm more comfortable. Like, late first round, early second round. Obviously, he's not going to go that low. But the reality is, Q, I just think he's very appealing for this Bears coaching staff.
Yeah, no, I see it too. And, full disclosure, obviously our board is still missing players and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, we've graded 112 players. We have 11 first round grades. So like, I'm right there with you. He's got a second round grade for me, like high second round, but that's probably going to be a top 20 pick in this class.
Yes.
But if we move on here to talk about Mykel Williams, very similar kind of traitsy guy with, I hate to say they're too similar though, because like I don't know. I want to hear your opinion before I get too much into what I'm thinking here, because he's a really interesting prospect for me. But so, what do you see with Mykel Williams?
Very interesting is right. He is like, I feel like the opinions on him are all over the place. So the billing with him is that he's also kind of like this freak athlete, right? He's like 6'4", 265, 34-inch arms. Ginormous, right? Like he looks like he was built in a lab. All the cliches you could possibly say about his physical look. There's a ton of them, right? The thing with him is like, I did not see the same level of athlete as Shemar Stewart. Like there are some, say what you want about Shemar Stewart, there are some like jaw dropping, like, okay, this dude just teleported off the line of scrimmage at 280 pounds. Like I've never seen a guy do that before type of reps on his tape. I don't see the same thing at all with Mykel Williams. I honestly think he's like, he might test amazing, but like a functional football player athleticism, I think he's pretty average. I don't see crazy explosive get off. I definitely don't see any crazy bend. I think he's honestly kind of slow getting around the corner. That was like a very minimal part of his game. His best reps to me as a pass rusher were from the interior. I thought there were some flashes of like sudden hand usage where he was able to win that way. And then he has a really high floor in the run game. Like he can do a lot of different things in the run game. He can set the edge, obviously, as an edge defender, but I also thought he two-gap pretty well as like a 5-tech or 4-eye. So I think he's more of a high floor player than this ceiling that everyone's talking about. I did not see that kind of ability with Stewart. Like I even think there's like, he's a projection, but at least with Stewart, I'm like, okay, I can see where he could eventually become that, even though it might not be likely. Mykel Williams, there's not even tapes on his rep. There's not even reps on his tape that could make me believe that.
Interesting, because I felt like I saw someone with a lot of really nice burst who was being used in ways that I didn't think made a lot of sense.
Okay.
Where like I saw some of what you saw with him when he reduced inside with some of the hand technique that was nice, but it was still kind of like, yeah, but you're 260 pounds playing against a guard. Like, what are you doing here? Like, and I thought that really was a disservice on his stats because, I mean, as we see here, the pass rush score that we have for him was the worst in the class.
Yeah.
But when I went and watched the tape, it was like, okay, I go back to the snap counts. Almost 50% of his college snaps have come over the tackle or inside of it with very few opportunities to actually play wide. And I felt like in the 3 games I watched, when he played wide, I was actually like, okay, I can see why this will work with the burst that he's getting and his ability to go win that outside shoulder on the tackle. Again, bend is not my strong suit, and I tend to like power players. So his ability to get into the tackle's chest and kind of manipulate the rep from there is something that my eyes get wide at more than bend. But that's just personal tastes, I guess. But so to me, I was looking at this like, I'd rather have this guy than Shemar Stewart.
Interesting.
Because I think he's been miscast in his role at Georgia. And I think that there's more upside within his player profile than is actually showing out when he's on those interior reps.
I think I need to watch the 2023 tape because he was playing hurt this year, and maybe that affected. I didn't see like a bad athlete by any means.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just thought that like I was like, okay, this is the guy that like everyone thinks is a freak athlete, and you're spot on the money. Like maybe they're playing him out of position, even though I do think he offers some versatility. Like he's a really good run defender. Like he can run defend like up and down the line of scrimmage. In my opinion, he's super strong, and honestly, like, among this class, this edge defending class, he's one of the best run defenders, if not the best. I don't know. I didn't see like absurd ability to like teleport off the line of scrimmage or explode off the ball. Like maybe it was the injury, and I really need to hone in on the reps that he was actually able to play outside of the tackle, because the ones that are sticking in my mind are the ones where he was more shaded inside.
Yeah, and so I guess when I'm looking at my grades here, because I watched 4 games actually. The Notre Dame game and the Texas regular season game, he had Shemar Stewart level pass rusher grades. Like that, those were not impressive.
Interesting.
But just like Shemar Stewart, all his run defense grades came in really strong. And the SEC championship game against Texas, I thought was his best pass rush grade that I watched. I had a near first round pass rush grade on that game. And then the Alabama game, he had a second round pass rush grade for me. So those 2 I felt really good about. The other 2 games, it felt very similar to Shemar Stewart. We're like, what are you doing here? Like, I don't really see it. But so, like I said, I think a lot of that was him playing inside. And like as I look at his schedule, let's see how his reps did in those games. So let's see, Texas was week 8. Yeah, I mean he played a little more outside again in that first Texas game. So that one was just not really good.
And I think that coming off the injury. I watched him pretty early, so I think I didn't catch the SEC game, the SEC championship game. Like I think I watched him pretty early on, and maybe that was why. I heard that the athleticism was better, or he looked more explosive in 2023. I have also heard.
Okay, interesting. And then so yeah, because the Texas game was right after that was his first full game back after the injury.
Okay.
And then the Alabama game was before the injury.
Right.
So that kind of explained, like I'm talking before the injury and end of the season where he looked good. and the two in the middle where he didn't look good to my eyes. So that's just an interesting consideration there. But I think Mykel Williams might be in play for the Bears at 10, and I'd like it better than Shemar Stewart.
He needs to test. He really needs to test because I really want to get like a firm, okay, this guy's athletic, right? Like I really just need that. And I know he didn't test because of the ankle injury, this past week at the combine. But I really want to see him test.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But if we move on to a different SEC edge rusher here, let's talk a little bit about Bradyn Swinson. Tom, have you watched much of Bradyn?
I have. I just watched him yesterday. I was like, because our guy Steve, CFC Chicago Football Connection on Twitter. We were talking. I was like, hey, is there anyone else I need to watch? He's like, you need to watch Bradyn Swinson. I was like, all right, that guy can play. I am a big Bradyn Swinson fan. He's not like elite at anything. Like I think he like offers you something at like kind of all the important aspects of playing edge rusher, right? Like he's an okay run defender. He gives a lot of effort there. He can make negative plays in the backfield by knifing inside and stuff like that. Is he going to be, this like hold the edge type of run defender? Probably not. Is he the most explosive guy in the world? No, but he's plenty explosive. He's plenty bendy. Again, just like not elite at anything, but he plays so damn hard. This dude just like never says die. He's giving 100. Like I said that with Mike Green. I would say they're tied. Those two are tied for like who plays the hardest in this class because he's just nonstop. Motors always running, will chase you down on the backside of plays. Like he's just plays so damn hard. He's so competitive. He's always like jawing with the opponents, and he's got pass rush moves. The thing with him is like he needs a counter. Like he just kind of lives and dies by his initial plan, and I think he could be so much better if he had more counter moves and was more willing to change his plan. But there's a lot to like, especially if this guy goes on day 2. Like you don't find pass rushers that skilled with the production that he's had over the past 2 years that fall on day 2. But I've heard like no round 1 buzz on him. So again, I don't know if he necessarily fits the Dennis Allen architect, but maybe he's big enough to where he offers you something a little different. Again, this is probably more of like a pass rush specialist, right? Bendy, explosive, who's got moves, right? So I really liked him. He was one of my favorite players in this class in terms of like the enjoyment of watching him.
So the first thing that stands out to me when I'm watching just his cut-ups, because I haven't actually graded his tape, but as I'm sitting here watching his cut-ups, the first thing that stands out to me is when this guy hits the quarterback feels it.
Yes.
You know who else has that trait? Is Gervon Dexter. And you pair two guys who will make the quarterback feel every single hit, every single point of contact. I think that's a good thing. Now, I'm seeing a lot of what you're seeing there just within the cut-ups. I see some nice hand usage, a good plan initially. There were no negative reps in there, so I didn't see the lack of counters or anything like that. But I do see a guy who's coming to the table with a plan. Maybe not the most bursty guy off the line of scrimmage, but he's bursty enough to win that corner, and then use his handwork from there and has a little bit of dip, a little bit of bend to his game that he can work that corner and get into the pocket. So I do think there's stuff to like there. Again, I didn't see the run reps, so I'll take your word for it. He might be a pass rush specialist type, but I see something to like and something that, Tom, do you think 39 or 41 would be early for him?
Absolutely not. I would love to get him. Again, I don't know if he's going to be the best fit because, he can rush speed to power too. I probably should have mentioned that. I don't know how successful that will be in the NFL, but he showed he can do it in college. I'm always intrigued about that. I think if you can win high side, right, with cornering to the quarterback, attacking tackles outside hip, and then you could also rush through them, I think you're kind of limitless in what you can do to an offensive tackle. And he, at least at the college level, he's shown he can do both. It's just, so if he's available at 39, I would absolutely run to the bank. It's just, I don't know if he's the best scheme fit that we were talking about earlier with Dennis Allen.
Now, why is that? Is that because the run aspect of that?
Yeah, he's got shorter arms. He's got decently sized arms, nothing crazy. He's not overly long. He's not overly big. He's kind of just athletic enough in everything, okay. Right? And yeah, he's not he's like a try hard run defender. You're not going to push him around, but is he going to be a stack and shed type where, if a team wanted to attack him, it could be an issue is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, if we go to another, I mean, it's just loaded up with SEC guys at this point, but another SEC edge defender in former Purdue legend, Nic Scourton at Texas A&M now. Interesting size profile here, in like with that natural leverage at like 6'2.5", but 260 pounds. Tom, what do you see in Scourton's tape?
Well, it's funny because Texas A&M, and there's kind of a story with Nic Scourton. So Texas A&M has him listed at 6'4", 285 pounds. And honestly, that could have been accurate because he looked like he was carrying a bunch of bad weight this year. And people were kind of wondering why the production was down from his last year at Purdue.
Those Aggies, man, they're always doing dumb stuff.
They're always just blowing up their D linemen. It's pretty weird. Their fetish with big defensive edges. But yeah, he was no different. He had like a gut that would hang out. Like it did not look good. He was clearly like bulking up for whatever they wanted him to do. I think they were kind of trying to run like a Georgia style of defense where it was like stop the run first and everything else will kind of follow suit after that. So I wanted him to slim down, which he did at the combine. He came in 2 inches less than what Texas A&M weighed him at, but he came in at 257 pounds from his listed 285 pound playing weight. And I wanted him to do that because I wanted him to test more explosive. That was my big concern with him. I think he's a pretty good run defender. I think he's always has a pass rush plan. He's always working to deconstruct blocks and beat tackles technically. I think he's honestly pretty flexible for being bigger. It's just he never was explosive enough to put himself in a situation where he could truly win that edge or he could truly win with speed to power. I thought there was always kind of an athletic limitation there. And that was my big question with him. I was like, okay, if you slim down, can you actually show that you are more athletic than what you were playing at 285 pounds? He comes in, looks a lot better, doesn't test at all, and does the drills, right? It wasn't an injury thing. He does the on the field drills and doesn't test. That's not a great sign to me, right? If you're physically able to test, you lost all this weight to test, why didn't you do it? So his pro day is going to be huge, but pro day numbers are kind of, they're flimsy numbers, right? The schools really do a lot to help them out. So I think anyone that drafts him is just going to be concerned with how good of an athlete he is. And that's just so damn important for edge rushers. Like we've seen, like if the guys who aren't great athletes usually don't do well. And that concern is just kind of always going to be in the back of my mind with him.
Yeah. And that concern probably, I mean, if I'm reading this right, comes down to like, is he at his ceiling? Or is he near his ceiling, right? Is there much more for him? Because he's such a technically sound player with so many moves and a pass rush plan like he got to. But how much better can he get from this point if he unlocks some more athleticism or if there's not much more for him to unlock?
100%. It's definitely a fair. I think you bring up a fair concern. And like also like, can you just, I would say no to this. This is kind of a rhetorical question, but like, can you just be a technician at the NFL level? I would say no. Like we've seen guys like this, like Bradley and I was the same way, right? Awesome college production, won technically, terrible athlete, flamed out of the league in like 2 years, right? Like, so I don't think he's that bad of an athlete. Like, I think there's still something there. And I think he honestly fits what Dennis Allen would look for. Like, he's heavy-handed, he's bigger. Round 2, I think it's definitely fair range to take him. I just really would like to get a better idea of what he is as an athlete because the tape was not great in that regard.
Yeah, and one question I would have with him, with generally in, I guess, the different conferences, historically, I mean, or the last, during Scourton's career, is the Big Ten more run-heavy than the SEC, or would you say they're pretty equal?
I don't have any numbers to this, but I would guess, right? Like, you have, like, the very run-heavy schools in the Big Ten, so, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, he generated 6 more pressures and 4 more sacks at Purdue in 23 on about 50 fewer pass rush snaps than he did at A&M. Like, so that weight aspect, I feel like definitely did bring his stats down a little when I'm just looking at the numbers.
100%. And like we talked about Mykel Williams in 2023. Like when I'm done, like really done with the class and I have lingering questions with some of these guys, I will go back sometimes and watch the 2023 tape to see, okay, maybe there was something different here. So that's what will be the time I'll probably do that with him. But I've heard from multiple people his 2023 was a lot better than his past season.
Yeah, I've heard the same as well. I'm interested to go dive into some of that Purdue tape. But
Yeah.
moving this thing along over to Ole Miss, just sticking with those SEC guys, Princely Umanmielen. I just it's like some people can't say aluminum.
Umanmielen. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Umanmielen. I know that's it, and I can hear it in my head, and then it's like as I'm saying it, I can't get it.
It's tough.
What do you see in Princely's game? I thought he was a lot of fun at Florida last year when I watched him, and he went to Ole Miss. But throwing it to you, what do you think?
I love him. I love Princely so much. I want to just take him for the Bears so badly, but there's things with him too, like the way he plays, and I don't know how well it would play for Dennis Allen and this Bears staff and this Bears regime, looking for culture guys. This is a guy who kind of freelances in the run game. He doesn't really care about doing the dirty work or holding the edge. Like, he wants to make negative plays and make the plays that win the game, right? Like, I don't knock that. It's kind of like the diva wide receiver thing, the guys that want the ball. I think he kind of plays with a similar play style. But in terms of like an isolation pass rusher, a guy who's going to win 1v1, I mean, he's as good as anybody in this class. His production, you can't ignore. In 3 years, the past 3 years, elite pass rush production. This is the prototypical guy that's going to play on third downs and be an absolute game wrecker. And what I love about him is he will give offensive tackles, the ghost move throughout the game, right? Just continually setting them up, continually scaring them that they have to overset to really protect their edges. And then he'll spin move back inside in the fourth quarter, and just the Georgia game, just like continually burn you with one move and then counter to another. He has a really good feel of how to set up an offensive tackle and make them worry about so many different things. I really think that just with him is you got to get him to buy in if he's going to be an every down player, if he's going to get drafted where he probably wants to get drafted, because the run defense, I don't think he takes plays off. He just compromises himself. That's the best way I can put it. He just tries to make splash plays and takes himself out of the fit. And it costs Ole Miss and Florida some big run defense lapses.
Yeah. Now, as I'm thinking back to when Trey Smith was drafted, or Trey Hendrickson, not Trey Smith. Yes. Trey Hendrickson was drafted. He was a speed to power rusher with a bunch of good pass rush moves, but who didn't set a good edge and was really a questionable run defender. And I'm sitting there going, man, that sounds a lot like Princely. Now, Trey Hendrickson at the combine was 20 pounds heavier than Princely. That has to matter. But I just remember that Saints defensive line when Hendrickson got there. It was this guy's getting all these sacks. Where'd he come from? He can't defend the run, but he's just playing a rotation and just eating. And I just can't help but wonder, could Princely be that guy for Dennis Allen here?
I would love it. I think the weird thing with him is he came to the Senior Bowl. It's 6'3", 264, comes to the combine, loses 20 pounds. He's 244 pounds. So okay, what weight do you play at, right? If you're 260, sign me up. And I would take him at 250, but with this Bear staff, sign me up if he plays at that weight and can do the things he was doing, super explosive, super bendy. I know the testing was not great. The jumps were great, but everything else was kind of a disaster. And that will have to be sussed out. I honestly think, Q, I don't know if you watched him, but his 40-yard dash was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. He was skipping. It was the weirdest 40-yard dash I have ever seen. He looked like he had never run ever before in his life.
So wait, you're telling me he ran a 4.7 and it was an awful form?
It was terrible. Yes, it was horrible. Yes, I know.
Honestly,
right?
You're selling me more on him because you're telling me that the guy didn't know how the hell to run a 40-yard dash and he still ran a 4.7. So he's a 4.6 guy is what that's what that sounds like to me at 244 pounds.
100%. I mean, am I crazy? Watch him play. He's explosive as hell. He's explosive, and his 3-cone was awful too. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. The 4.7 wasn't terrible, but for 240 pounds to lose weight to run a 4.7 was a bit odd. And I think a lot of it was technique driven, but his testing does not reflect the kind of athlete I think he is. I think he's plenty explosive. I think he's plenty bendy. And, I'm always looking. I'm always curious about those guys. So I totally agree with you, Q. If he's going to be your situational pass rusher, he's going to be one of the better ones in the NFL if he can keep his head on straight. I've also heard character, work ethic concerns with him as well. Yeah.
What I'm hearing when you told me he's basically skipping during his 40-yard dash is, so his buddy's training him for the combine.
That's
he ain't get a professional. Like, okay.
Exactly.
Now, let's move this thing along over to Donovan Ezeiruaku.
Yes, I think you said that right.
Okay. So out of Boston College. Now, I know I watched some of this guy last year based on his 2023 tape, or during the offseason pretty much. And I mean, it just felt like he had a bunch of moves in his bag and he was just twitched up and a lot of fun to watch. But what do you see when you watch his tape?
He's so damn polished. Like, he almost like rushes the passer in slow motion. Like, he just has like such a unique understanding of how to rush the passer, how to attack leverage, when to counter back inside. And my video breakdown of him, Q, I was going to leave the report to Steve because I know this was one of Steve's guys very early on. I called him the bendiest edge rusher in the class. Like, what he's able to do, how low he's able to get while turning the corner at full speed. I mean, just some rare stuff. Now, he isn't the biggest guy in the world, 6'4", 6'4". Where am I looking at here? Oh, yeah. So 6'2", 248 pounds. But he's got 34-inch arms, right? So that kind of gives me more hope for him as a run defender. I don't think run defense will ever be a strength of his, but like, can you not get bodied? Can you just hold your ground? I think that's firmly in the cards for him. He'll probably always.
If you're going to give me an edge rusher who's under 250, make him 6'2" with 34-inch arms. That is a leverage dream. Like,
there you go. That's exactly how it is. Like, I think he's the guy that can hold the edge. Can he stack and make plays? Probably not. Like, that's more or less what I think you're getting in him. And he's really instinctive. Like, he's really good at diagnosing run plays and finding the ball, and beating tackles to spots versus maybe like stacking and just kind of beating them physically. So I really, really like him. Again, like, I don't know. Like, he doesn't scream Dennis Allen, but like, again, if you can get him in a range where he's only a situational pass rusher for you, I don't know how you don't love this guy.
Yeah, and this is probably like one of the dumbest things I'll say on this show because it's so clearly just a Boston College connection. But like, I watched him. I remember thinking like, this is like a Zay Flowers of edge rushers. Like, he's just really clean and technically sound, and the cuts are so nice. But like, it's probably just because they're wearing the same jersey. But
for sure.
But moving on to a couple of Ohio State guys, and we'll start this off with a guy who, one of the top prospects in the country coming out of high school, like a guy who's it's always felt like the reputation has been a little bigger than the production, but Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. What do you see with him?
He is interesting. So he comes to the combine and weighs in at 6'4", 260. That checks out from his playing weight at college, but he has under 32-inch arms. And I didn't think he had the longest arms in the world on tape, but I did think he did create decent extension against the run. That's concerning to me because run defense, like who he's going to be in the NFL, which is like a hustle player, run defending, edge setting, power rusher. If you got short arms, like I feel like that's a pretty hard thing to do at the NFL level. I usually don't care about arm length, but like for him specifically and what he's going to provide an NFL team, which is kind of like a floor-based player, that was a bit alarming for me. So I kind of knocked him down a few notches in my grading. I have him as again, I don't think he's going to be drafted in like round 4, but like that's kind of where I have him. I think he's more of a floor player where like, yeah, you could start him, but probably best as a rotational piece that can do specific things.
Yeah, and so Sawyer's one of the guys who I haven't actually watched that closely yet, but as we're doing this show and there's a handful of guys I haven't watched closely yet, I'm trying to pull up their Twitter highlight videos and just get a general vibe for their play outside of what I've seen just during broadcasts. And one of the first things that I gave across on Twitter when searching Jack Sawyer, right as you were talking about his short arms, is a tweet that says Jack Sawyer hasn't drawn a holding call since 2001. Over 1,600 snaps. I'm like, yep, short arms checks out. That makes sense. Now, how about his teammate, Tom, JT Tuimoloau?
Unfortunately, I don't want to, speed past these guys because they're towards the bottom, but I just don't think he's an NFL athlete. I think he can defend the run. I think, there's a role for him. There's just such lack of wins on his tape as a pass rusher. Like, he just doesn't get off the ball quick enough. He tries to rush speed to power. It just doesn't really go anywhere. There's occasional pass rush moves. I think he's kind of like a slow burn pass rush move guy, like where, the athleticism he tries to display on his initial move where he's like trying to beat you to the edge or he's trying to run through you doesn't work. And then he can kind of hustle his way to sacks. I know the sack numbers are great, but the down production is not great. He's a decent run defender. I think he's like a decent team construct run defender. I don't think he's like this elite stack and shed going to take it to every single offensive tackle he goes up against. So again, I think there's a role for him, but I just did not see a high-end athlete to where like I'm not drafting this guy to like minimum round 3, or at most I should say round 3, maybe more of a day 3 guy to me.
So I've actually managed to watch quite a bit of JT Tuimoloau over the last like 2 years, just between different Big Ten offensive tackles that I'm grading and actually looking at him before he decided to go back last year. And also in Brandon Thorne's Trench episode with Josh Simmons, they get to talking about like Josh Simmons is, not to make this an offensive line thing, but Josh Simmons is consistently changing up his stance to create false ideas for the defenders of what he's doing. And Brandon Thorne asked him, like, why do you do that? Like, where'd you get that? And he says, if I don't do that to JT in practice, JT will eat my lunch.
Interesting.
Because JT, like, keys in on so many fine details in film. This is what Josh Simmons was saying, that it forces him to be that much better because of it. And that when I heard that tracks so much with like watching Olu Fashanu's tape last year. JT stole that man's soul
for
in the fourth quarter of the Penn State Ohio State game, because I think my read on that is JT Tuimoloau is playing 3D chess in the first quarter, and he is setting up his fourth quarter moves early in the game. And he is that type of player. Now it comes back to the question that you asked earlier with someone, can you be that guy without traits in the NFL? And I agree with you. I'm not sure you can. But if there's one guy who's gonna have a shot, I think it's JT Tuimoloau, just because he seems like he has so much of that mental side so locked down already. But I'm not sure it can happen.
100%. And the thing with him is like there's a bunch of those plays on tape. Like he's like a lot of interceptions for an edge rusher, like a guy that like knew a screen was coming and jumped the screen. Like you can clearly tell like he's locked in at all times, right? Like I don't want to disparage him. My main concerns with him is just athleticism. Like it shows up at the college level. I think it's only going to be a bigger issue in the NFL. Yeah,
no, I mean, I think that he is like maybe like a third round. Like he is a locker room guy, a glue guy. Like he's going to be putting the work in, and others will gain from that because they'll follow suit. Like he's that leadership locker room guy, but I'm not sure you can take him that high just based on the traits that he shows.
Now, 100%.
Moving on to a guy who is very different from JT Tuimoloau in my mind is Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. Tom, what are your thoughts here?
Man, he's interesting. He's really, really interesting. So this is a guy that's like looks ginormous. I mean, he is ginormous. 6'6", 264. He was in the 270s again or at the Senior Bowl. And the thing with him, Q, is he doesn't really play up to that size. He's more of a finesse player. He likes to corner around the edge. He likes to kind of cross space when tackles overset. I didn't think he was a great athlete from watching him on tape. He comes to the combine and has comparable jumps to Shemar Stewart that like no one's really talking about. Like he was kind of the same level athlete. Obviously doesn't run as fast as of a 40, and that maybe measured up to more. It was still a great 40 for his size, especially, but maybe that was more of what I kind of was expecting it from him as an athlete, like an okay one. So I'm really curious about him as a situational pass rusher. I think that's kind of be his best role. I honestly don't think he's a good run defender. You know, he's got shorter arms for him specifically for being 6'6". He has 33-inch arms. that kind of doesn't measure out, like that doesn't balance itself out. And he doesn't really get off blocks all that well in the run game. So I think he's more pass rush first. And the weird thing with him too is like Arkansas played him at 5 tech a ton, and it was an absolute disaster. I mean, he plays way too high, gets blown off the ball. I think I would like to just see him in more of like a wide 9 true edge technique.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you on a lot of that. I don't think his run defense is the most replicable thing at the NFL level. And again, this second Tyree Wilson mention of the day, but Tyree Wilson dominated in college by just destroying read option because he was the longest individual on the planet. And I see some similarities with Landon Jackson, where his run defense wins are just because he's so long that in the college game, which is slower, backs are slower to read stuff out, to hit the hole. He just has that length that can destroy it. In the NFL, I don't think that really happens that often. There aren't many guys who can destroy it that way. Like if they could, we'd be seeing Montez Sweat do it regularly, right? Like it's just a faster game where so. And I agree with you where I think he is more that finesse style rusher, despite having some traits that would tell you that he's a guy who's going to win with power. Like he is so slippery as a pass rusher. And he does such a good job of kind of ghosting guys with his arms. And they might be able to latch onto his arms, but you can't do that because that's going to get you a hold. Mm-hmm. So, and then he's by you. Like he has some really freaky athletic traits for his size and length, but the production is just a big question here. And like, I think you hit a lot of nails on the head with him, where when I watched him in 23, before he decided to go back to Arkansas, I remember thinking, this might be a guy you can get in the second round that at that time and say, there's a lot to work with here. We just need to develop it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he really grew from 23 to 24, which is just it almost hurts his draft stock at that point. Like, why didn't you get better?
100%. I definitely think that's a fair question. And yeah, the production, we didn't even talk about that. It was not great. It wasn't what you wanted it to be. But again, maybe if he's I think Arkansas didn't do him a lot of favors in how they were playing him. So maybe if that, you can kind of just minimize his role and maybe take a less is more type of approach with him in the NFL, he could give you more consistent production, because I do think there's traits there from a pass rush standpoint. And Q, I thought you brought up a great point that I forgot to mention. He does not rush with power well. I think a lot of that is because he plays so high and it's hard for him to get under people's pads and drive them back. So again, he, like you said, like he's more of a finesse style, and that's just weird when you look at his body. You wouldn't think that.
It's all weird because he's such a high motor guy too. Yes. So like if I were a defensive line coach, I'd be saying, give me this guy and I'll fix him. But like, that's also what gets people in trouble. So like, but I mean, I love the profile. I just wish that there was something more solid to latch onto with it.
Most definitely.
Now, last guy we got here is Jordan Burch out of Oregon. And this is one of those guys who I haven't watched much of, so I'm going to have to lean on you for this one, Tom.
So if you are just looking for what Shemar Stewart gives you as a pass rusher, and honestly, I think Jordan Burch offers a little more in terms of like the technical aspects and some of the wins he had on his college tape. I think Jordan Burch is a damn good candidate you can get on day 2. If you're looking, if you couldn't get an edge rusher in round 1, and you took an offensive lineman, or you took Aston Genty, whatever the case may be, I think Jordan Burch is a damn good consolation prize for what the Bears want. Now, for being 6'4", 279, he is not a good run defender. Kind of like Landon Jackson. He's not. It's weird. He does not get off blocks well. He kind of gets tied up too much. He doesn't get pushed around because he's that big. It's kind of just hard to move him off the ball. But like he just doesn't really get off blocks. And that was a problem I consistently saw on his tape. But he knows how to rush the passer. He's got pass rush moves. He was a pretty good athlete at I think he ran like a 4.6 something 40 at 280 pounds. And he can corner decently well too for being a bigger guy. And the best thing about his game is he really knows how to rush speed to power. So the motor wasn't always what I wanted it to be, but again, in terms of what the Bears are looking for specifically as a pass rusher, he's definitely a day 2 option to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, he just from the highlight reel I pulled up, like just that long arm move looks pretty devastating. But
Yes.
like that, it seems like that's a lot of what he relies on. But like, if it works, it works. I don't want Braxton Jones going up against that long arm.
There you go. There you go.
But so I think that wraps it for us, Tom. Are there any other sleepers you want to mention or anything along those lines?
Not really. I think we really covered up most of the guys in this
Yeah,
class.
I mean, it's a big list.
Yes.
All right. Well, Tom, thank you so much for jumping on and talking Edge with us. And why don't you tell everyone one more time where they can find your work and find you?
So obviously I'm doing work with On Tap. You guys can check out my scouting reports there. I recommend checking out all of the scouting reports that we've done. And then on Twitter at Tommy K NFL draft, Tommy K _NFL draft. And then, my podcast, Bears Blog Boys podcast. You guys should definitely check that out as well. We got to have you on that podcast here shortly to talk some draft, because there's no other better person to talk to. We got to make that a time to do that.
Yeah, man. Let me know. We'll figure it out. But thank you again for joining me. And as always, thank you guys for listening, watching, and bear down.
Bear down.